I got a mother done gone on. I got a mother done gone on. Makes me feel like my time ain't long. I got a mother done gone on. Got a mother done gone on. It makes me feel like my time ain't feel like my time ain't long. Well, the bell keep a tolling, tolling. The bell keep a tolling, tolling. Make me feel like my time ain't long. Yeah, no, the bell keep a tolling, child, the bell keep a tolling. It makes me feel like my time ain't long. Well, I got a father gone on. I got a father gone on. Makes me feel like my time ain't long. Father and gone on. Father and gone on. Make me feel like my time had long. Ooh, the hearse keep a rolling, rolling. The hearse keep a rolling, rolling, and that make me feel like my time ain't long. Lordy, Lord, well, the hearse keep a rolling, rolling. The hearse keep a rolling. Keep me feel like my time ain't no long.
As I traveled on my journey, few and far between, were the pilgrims I found faithful to their loving.
Welcome to Plain Talk About Life in the Bible. We're going through Pilgrim's Progress. We're at the point where Mr. Byens from the town of Fair Speech is engrossed in a conversation with our hero Christian and his sidekick Hopeful, and he has told him about his pastor, Mr. Two Tongues, and their proclivity for not going against the tide, and that they're not quite as strict in religion as some others are, and blah, blah, blah. And we're about to take a jump in a minute to Matthew, the 7th chapter, beginning in about verse 15, where Jesus himself is describing, he's just finished talking about the narrow way and the broad way, and he's going to describe wolves in sheep clothing. But before we do, I ended the last show by saying my life had been a failure, most of it, I assumed and believed, because I never could shake the idea that a man needed to be rich in this world, and I wanted to be that man. I was a poor kid. We never had much. And maybe every poor boy wants to be a rich boy. I certainly wanted to be. And I gave a lot of my years to chasing money. What years I didn't give, or maybe they were identical years, I gave to chasing women. And I was decent at that too, unfortunately. And I'm going to say, boys, if you're young and you have any skills in chasing women or in making money, you want to give them up probably. You want to curse yourself for them. Neither of them is going to do you any good in the next world. They're only going to bring you heartache in this world. And the sooner you learn that, the better. Now, if you can't learn from my mistakes, then you're bound to repeat them. Hopefully you'll listen to me, take a word of warning, and quit being charming. There's a big price to pay for being charming. I was ugly and charming. If you were good-looking and charming, you got twice the freight to carry and twice the price to pay, I suspect. I never was terrific at business. I've been adequate at it, and unfortunately, I managed to make some money at it, probably because I was reckless enough to make some. Or as the great G.K. Chesterton said, to find a man who's clever enough to make a great deal of money, you have to find one who's stupid enough to want it. Now think about that. Do you agree with that sentiment? If you're stupid enough to want a great deal of money, then maybe the next question is, are you clever enough to find it? Most people who can't get it still want it. If you want fame and fortune in this world, go on the broad road to destruction. Live your life here. You won't find fame or fortune here. Your money will flee, and your fame will be fleeting. I can promise you those things. You don't have to listen to me, but you should, because I've seen it, and I've also learned it in the Scriptures. Now, I want you to think about your life. Sometimes I teach these things without pleading with you or being as plain as I'd like to be if we were sitting at dinner face to face. You only do have a choice between life and death. If you're 50 years old and all you've chosen so far is some outward show of religion under some pastor who's telling you that if you just show up at Mass or if you just come to Sunday school and church and send your check in, that's going to assure you a place in heaven, let me be the first one to tell you that's absolute crap. It's a lie. The guy, if you're not born again, the Scripture's plain, you won't go to heaven. A great man, Thomas Watson, once described it like this. He said, a man who's not been born again and goes to church regularly is like a pile of dung with a flower stuck in it. Now think of that. A pile of dung with a flower stuck in it. If you saw that today on your driveway, would you think it was beautiful? I doubt it. A single daffodil sticking out a pile of crap 2 feet high and 2 feet wide? No, you'd be mad. You'd be irritated. If you are smart enough to judge that to be incongruous in some way, well, how do you think God views you? When He sees you, and you're an abomination to Him because you don't care about Him, you don't care about His ways or His rules or His kingdom, and all you really want to do is give it a flowery speech about being a phony when you come to church or coming to Mass for 20 minutes so you can run out the door and not have another thought about Him for a week. How do you think He views that? The God who has pure eyes and can't stand to look on iniquity. Do you think you've deceived Him? For heaven's sakes, obviously you haven't even deceived me. I'm basically a moron running around in the 21st century, and I've already smelled what you are. Don't you think the all-seeing, the all-knowing God can figure you out a little more quickly than I can? Folks, if anybody's deceiving anybody, it's you deceiving yourself. You might be self-deceived, I'll grant you that, but you're not deceiving anybody else. Your heart is not in it. And you might say to me, Bill, I don't think my heart needs to be in it. I can go to church once a week. It's Sundays only for me for an hour in the morning. I'll listen to that pastor if I have to. Or I'll go to Mass first thing on, Saturday evening or whatever else you do. And Bill, as far as I can tell, the pastor has no complaint about it, just you do. And I'm saying to you, that doesn't surprise me. As I've said to you before, there are plenty of false pastors in this world. They dot the landscape kind of like dandelions. And if you don't watch it, they'll take over your whole yard. Now, they'll tell you everything's fine. But are they the judge of everything fine? Any more than Bill Moore is the judge of everything's wrong. The Scriptures are the judge. Wouldn't you grant me that Christ Himself can draw the line and say, this is good teaching, this is bad teaching, this is correct, this is incorrect? Then we're going to read from Matthew the 7th chapter, beginning at verse 15, and you're going to hear Christ Himself explaining to you that there are wolves in sheep's clothing. It isn't my idea. He knew it. The Apostle Paul knew it. A great and substantial part of the New Testament is spent in dealing with false teachers. You shouldn't be surprised, and yet every time I see people, they say, Bill, you're awfully hard on false teachers. I'm not hard enough on false teachers. Why? I'm falling below the standard that Christ set for being hard with false teachers. Your life is at stake if you go to sleep in a pew on Sunday morning and some pastor pats you on the head and thanks you for coming. He ought to take a cattle prod and ram it up your nostril if he cared about you. But he apparently doesn't, or he's himself deluded. Now, are those too crazy of things to say to you? I only say those kinds of things, one, because there's probably something a little askew with me. Secondly, there's a lot askew with you. If I thought a BB gun to your forehead would wake you up, I'd take the BB gun out. But I have a feeling, and I have some people in mind when I say this, that your forehead is so hard that I'll need a high-powered rifle to just put a dent in it. I need to shake you up a little bit because I'm too kind and too sweet and too stupid, frankly, to take you by the shoulders and shake you till the money flies out of your pocket and the sense flies in your ears. Understand? We all need to be awakened to the danger we're in. When you go to sleep tonight, if God's angry with you when you go to sleep, remember Psalm 7:11 said, God is a just judge. He's angry with the wicked every day. I didn't say that. God said it. He's telling you how he feels about you, even while he gives you breath and gives you a good night's sleep. How can you sleep at night knowing he's angry with you? I did it for years, but it was because I was like a brute. I was like a pig in the forest. I couldn't even stay still long enough to figure out that the owner of the forest was unhappy with me, rooting all the way through his forest, and was going to find me one day and butcher me. That's where you stand if you're an unbeliever. Now, let me have Max read you Matthew chapter 7, beginning at verse 15, and let's see if Christ speaks as boldly about these things as your poor friend Bill does. Thanks.
Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits.
As you can see, Christ says, beware of false prophets. Now, the group there included some different people, but primarily his own disciples. Beware of false prophets. Do you think the warning is any less needful today, really? Beware of false prophets. Then he gives you the reason. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. People say to me all the time, well, Bill, I don't know how you can speak so ill of Joel Osteen or Kenneth Copeland or one of those things. Well, I'm telling you, it is by their fruits, which is Christ is going to lay out here. That's what gives me the right to do it. In fact, the duty to do it. Because you may not be as experienced at this, at picking up when there's a wolf in sheep's clothing, as I am. And I've been around a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. And I've been around a lot of hypocrites, a lot of pretenders. And you say to me, but Bill, they're ministers. Who do you think the prophets were? When Christ says to the scribes and Pharisees that they're whitewashed tombs, who do you think he's dealing with? He's dealing with paid clergy. It shouldn't shock you that paid clergy, many of them will be in hell. That's it. The Bible is, in the Old Testament, you'll find all manner of false teachers and false prophets. They're just rampant, and it's obvious they're rampant in the New Testament.